From WisPolitics in Madison, you're listening to Capital Chats.
Hello, everybody. This is Kate Morton with WisPolitics, here with the Capital Chats podcast brought to you by Spectrum. Today, I'm joined in our Madison office with my colleague Abigail Levins to talk about an interview that she did with GOP governor candidate Bill Berrien. So, Abigail, what are some of the things that you guys talked about?
Yes, Kate. Bill and I talked about his candidacy for governor, his background as a Navy SEAL and businessman, and what he would do with the budget, as well as some of his policies if he were elected.
Sounds good. Let's hear what he had to say.
Bill, thank you for agreeing to come on the podcast today. Appreciate you being here. And I really want to talk to you about your run for governor. And I want to start by talking about the news everyone's talking about, which is Evers deciding not to run. How do you feel about that? How do you think this is changing the race?
So honestly, Abigail, I don't think it changes the race much. Whoever on the Democratic side is the eventual nominee is, I see, going to be trying to embrace and extend Tony Evers' policies that, frankly, have had the state in reverse gear, the past 6 years. We need to be moving forward. I see the opportunity to make this the Wisconsin century and to, be ground zero and sort of the shining example for the reindustrialization of the United States, starting in Wisconsin, that President Trump is driving.
Sure. And let's talk about you and let's talk about your background. You've highlighted that you were a Navy SEAL and that you're a businessman. Tell me about that background, your military background, and how you started your business.
Terrific. Yeah, so I served in the Navy SEAL teams about 9 years, just shy of 9 years. And actually, for a few years down the hall, in a platoon down the hall from Derek Van Orden, which was great. So I've known him since the early 90s. In the SEAL teams, they taught us to lead, they taught us to fight. And for the last 13 years, I've been running a manufacturing company, just in Waukesha County. And our business is, contract machining, precision machine parts. I mean, we are taking the battle to China every day. We hire American, we train American, and it's a great opportunity. I love the leadership side of life, and coming from being an outsider, being a businessman, similar to President Trump's background, gives me that perspective on how we need the state, the government to have our back, because we can really, again, make this the Wisconsin century. And I have a vision for, basically it's prosperity for everyone through work.
Mm-hmm. And I also want to talk about what made you enter this race. We've seen businessmen like Tim Michels and Eric Hovde not succeed in Wisconsin. What do you think sets you apart from them that's going to help you succeed here?
Well, I really like my, small, medium-sized company leadership. I'm bringing that. I'm bringing a different leadership background in terms of the Navy SEAL background, and I'm taking a view of how do we win, across the state, up and down ballot. What can I be doing as part of this election to helping Republicans, extend our majorities in the Assembly and the Senate? So it's a very sort of comprehensive leadership vision there.
Sure. And you talked a little bit about what you would want to do as governor. What was the catalyst for getting you into the race this time?
Well, I see, an opportunity and a need, frankly. Going back to earlier comments, it does feel like the gears have been in reverse. We need to reopen Wisconsin for business. It had been opened under Scott Walker. It's been closed the last 6 years. And we also need to be helping businesses here do much better. And where businesses do better, encouraging that investment in the workforce. And I am looking and eager for the leadership opportunity of being the governor.
Yeah. And with that, how do you mentioned businesses and supporting businesses. What are other policy issues that are really going to be important to you if you were elected?
Look, I think we need to be doing much, much better on education. Tony Evers came in as the education governor, and it's been a record of moving the goalposts back, performance and standards not being met, and it's really just unsatisfactory. I take a line from Vince Lombardi, who said, "I'm going to shoot for perfection. I won't hit perfection, but I'm going to hit excellence." And that needs to be our vision and our ambition for education in Wisconsin. It needs to be excellent. And where parents feel that they are not getting an excellent product and output, we need to give them choice, and they need to be in control of pursuing that excellence for their children.
Yeah.
Additionally, one of my passion points as a business leader is we need to be focusing more on upskilling the workforce that's already employed, 25 years old to 75 years old. What can we be doing to give them skills to always be in the fight for opportunity? No matter what how industries change, how technology changes, and even how personal interests change, they need to be in that fight and on a path to prosperity. Again, prosperity for everyone through work.
Yeah. On a similar subject, I know you've mentioned before you want to replicate some of President Donald Trump's trade policies here in Wisconsin. What would that look like on a state level?
Well, actually, I want to be the vehicle for the success of those trade policies, because when you think about it, Wisconsin has a 125-year-old manufacturing ecosystem, one of the absolute best in the world, and the highest per capita manufacturing in the country. We have a highly trained, highly trainable workforce. And now, with the incentives in President Trump's tariffs to invest in this country, changing the mix of business decision making so that more is made here, combined with all of the tax and financial incentives of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. That act is sort of like a Black Friday sale of factory expansion. No coupons required. And that combination, presents the opportunity again for this to be, ground zero, exhibit A for the reindustrialization of the country. But it absolutely requires the right governor to be in office.
Sure. On the subject of President Trump, you've mentioned you're pretty confident in being able to get his endorsement. Obviously, there's been people talking about that since you backed his primary opponent in the last election. How are you feeling right now? It seems like you do have a lot of support for President Trump. What has changed, and do you think he'll still support you after what happened last year?
I mean, look, there was something, someone say sort of, magical or unheard of, whether it was a combination, was the shooting in Butler, attempted assassination in Butler, J.D. Vance joining the ticket, or a general election that moved all of the demographics to the right. Coming into office, President Trump is answering the mail. I mean, he is responding to the need that he heard around a workforce that wants to be relevant, wants to have pride, wants to have a future, of closing the borders. And he is exercising and pulling on the levers. And it's really been remarkable what's happened in these first 6 months of the administration.
Yeah, yeah. And another question on the race, another big question, we're talking about endorsements, we're also talking about finances. The races have been getting more and more expensive in Wisconsin. How do you feel about your ability to raise money and get this campaign fundraised?
I feel very strong about it. We have a clear vision, and we're seeing on the fundraising side a lot of strength there that is going to continue. And so we're off to a great start. I think you saw the news or announcement of our buying ads, and across the state we're seeing that ongoing fundraising opportunity that is not going to really make it the finances a consideration.
Sure. And thinking about finances in a different direction, we obviously just passed the state budget. What is your overall impression? What are some red flags for you? What are some things you're happy about?
Look, the budget was a compromise, but I think it clearly showed that we need to have a Republican governor in the governor's mansion, so we don't have to compromise on some very important principles in the future. Why are we having UW funding increasing when enrollment's going down? What can we be doing to invest better in workforce development, mid-career apprenticeships, things along those lines. So, I would take it in some in some different directions. And I'd also like to see, especially from a businessman's perspective, more zero-based budgeting rather than a year-over-year continuations of what's been done in the past.
Yeah. And could tell us more about that strategy and how that would support Wisconsinites and why you think that would be the best.
Well, I think you want to get into the budget just as we do in business, and that zero-based budgeting is building it up from the bottom. Understanding what are your spending needs, what are the must-haves, what are the nice-to-haves, where are your priorities, and do the priorities reflect in the budget, reflect the priorities of the administration and the legislature. So under my governorship, there's going to be quite a bit of deep diving and review of how and where we are spending money.
Sure. On another big policy item that's been discussed a lot this year with abortion and the Supreme Court deciding to say the 1849 law doesn't ban abortions. How do you feel about Wisconsin's 20-week abortion ban? Should there be more or less restrictions?
Abigail, I'm pro-life. We need to avoid the extremism of late-term abortions. I support all the exceptions. So that's the approach that I take on that issue.
Sure. And one more policy question for you. Some have criticized you for previously supporting ranked choice voting, but I know you said that's not something you agree with anymore. Why do you no longer back this system?
Abigail, I approached election issues as an outsider, as a businessman. I saw a challenge with smaller candidates, smaller parties siphoning off Republican votes, and thought this would be a good solution to that challenge. But as I learned more, I decided it is not appropriate for Wisconsin. And so, as I've said earlier, as governor, would not support it. And in fact, it would be dead on arrival if it hit my desk.
Yeah. Well, Bill, those are all the big questions I have for you. Anything else you want to add to tell people about you as a person or what you're expecting in this race?
I'd like to make a quick plug, billforwisconsin.com, and I'm going to be making it all over the state and would love to interact. And I'm also, as I go around, starting a little, I love brandy old fashions and starting a little series of Bill's old-fashioned governor tour. So, please let me know your favorite brandy old-fashioned spot. And as I campaign, I'll make my best effort to hit that.
Great. Well, thank you, Bill, so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Perfect. Thanks, Abigail. Appreciate the time.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's podcast. In the meantime, if you'd like to learn more about the gubernatorial race to succeed Tony Evers, you can head to our website at wispolitics.com. But for now, I'm Kate Morton.
And I'm Abigail Evans.
Thanks for tuning in to Capital Chats, brought to you by Spectrum.